The sound filled the small, cold medical room. Whoosh, whoosh, whoosh. It was the sound of a strong, healthy heartbeat, but it shouldn't have been there. Elira gripped the paper gown, her knuckles turning white, staring at the ultrasound monitor in pure horror. She hadn't been with a man in over 2 years. She came in for a simple health check, nothing more. "There must be a mistake," she whispered, tears stinging her eyes. The doctor didn't look at her. He looked terrified. He knew something she didn't. That heartbeat didn't belong to just any baby. It belonged to the heir of the city's most ruthless monster, Jaden Moretti. And he would tear the world apart to get it back. The waiting room of the Lennox Mercy Fertility and Wellness Center smelled of expensive lilies and harsh antiseptic. It was a smell that made Elira Vance nauseous, though she attributed that to the stale coffee she'd had before her shift at the diner. Elira was 24, struggling to pay off her late mother's medical debts, and living in a shoebox apartment in Queens. She didn't belong in a place like Lennox Mercy, located on the Upper East Side, where the marble floors were polished to a mirror shine, and the clientele wore sunglasses worth more than Elira's car. She was only here because the clinic offered free routine checkups for women under 25 as part of a state-funded women's health initiative. Or at least, that's what the flyer at the community center had said. "Ms. Vance?" a nurse called out. The nurse, whose name tag read Brenda, looked frantic. Her eyes were darting around the room, and her hands shook slightly as she held the clipboard. Elira stood up, smoothing down her worn denim skirt. "That's me," Elira said, offering a tired smile. "Right this way. Quickly, please. Dr. Harrison Frey is on a tight schedule," Brenda said, her voice tight. Elira followed her down a long, pristine corridor. She noticed Brenda was walking unusually fast, almost jogging. "Is everything okay?" Elira asked. "Fine. Everything is fine, just busy day," Brenda snapped, ushering Elira into exam room 4. "Change into the gown. The doctor will be in for your procedure." "It's just a pap smear and a standard physical, right?" Elira asked, feeling a sudden wave of anxiety. Brenda paused at the door, looking at Elira with a strange, unreadable expression. It looked like pity mixed with panic. "Just do as you're told, honey." 20 minutes later, Dr. Harrison Frey entered. He was a sweating, balding man who looked like he hadn't slept in a week. He didn't make eye contact. He mumbled through the questions, checked her chart, and then instructed her to lie back. The exam felt different than previous ones. It was longer, more invasive. Elira felt a sharp pinch, a sensation of pressure that felt wrong for a simple checkup. "Ouch," she winced. "Dr. Frey, is that normal?" "Almost done," he grunted, sweat dripping down his temple. He was moving with a clumsy urgency. He handled a syringe-like instrument with trembling hands. "Just relax." When it was over, he stripped off his gloves and threw them in the bin with aggressive force. "You're done. You can go. The front desk will have your follow-up date." Elira left the clinic feeling violated and strange. A deep, cramping sensation settled in her lower abdomen. She tried to shake it off. It was just a checkup. Doctors knew what they were doing. 2 weeks passed. The cramping hadn't stopped. In fact, it had been replaced by a morning nausea so violent that Elira had to run from her waitressing station to the bathroom 3 times in one shift. Her boss, a gruff man named Tony, had threatened to fire her if she didn't get it together. She blamed food poisoning. Then she blamed the flu. But when she fainted carrying a tray of iced teas to table 4, Tony sent her home. "Go back to that fancy doctor," he barked. "You look like a ghost." So Elira found herself back at Lennox Mercy. But this time, the atmosphere was different. The moment she gave her name at the reception, the receptionist's eyes went wide. She immediately picked up the phone. "She's here. Yes, right now." Before Elira could ask what was going on, Dr. Frey appeared. He wasn't sweating this time. He looked pale, like a man walking to the gallows. "Come with me, Miss Vance. Now." He didn't take her to an exam room. He took her to his private office, locking the heavy oak door behind them. He sat behind his desk, wringing his hands. "What is wrong with me?" Elira demanded, fear spiking in her chest. "Is it cancer? Tell me." "It's not cancer," Dr. Frey whispered. He pushed a piece of paper across the desk. It was a lab result. Elira looked at it. The medical jargon was confusing, but one word stood out clearly. Positive. "I don't understand," Elira said. "What is positive?" "Your pregnancy test, Elira. You are pregnant." The room spun. Elira laughed, a harsh, hysterical sound. "That's impossible. You have the wrong file. I haven't been with anyone in 2 years, not since my ex moved to Chicago. It's literally impossible." Dr. Frey took a deep breath. He looked like he was about to vomit. "It was an error, a catastrophic error. 2 weeks ago, when you came in, there was a mix-up in the lab prep room. Nurse Brenda, she was under a lot of pressure. She swapped the trays." Elira stared at him, her mouth agape. "Swapped the trays? You were supposed to receive a pep smear. The patient in room 3 was supposed to receive an intrauterine insemination, a very specific, very expensive procedure." Dr. Frey's voice dropped to a terrified whisper. "Brenda used the sample intended for room 3. On you." Elira stood up, knocking her chair over. You artificially inseminated me. By mistake. It was an accident." "It was an," Frey pleaded, holding his hands up. "We can fix it. We can terminate the pregnancy immediately. I will pay you. The clinic will pay you $2 million. Cash, today. You just have to sign an NDA, and we handle this right now." $2 million. It was enough to change her life, enough to pay off the debts, buy a house, escape the diner. But the horror of what had been done to her was overwhelming. "Who?" Elira whispered, her hands instinctively moving to her flat stomach. "Whose baby is this?" Dr. Frey went white. "It doesn't matter. You don't want to know. Trust me, Ms. Vance, you do not want to know. Just take the money and let us fix this." "Tell me!" Elira screamed. Dr. Frey looked at the door as if expecting it to be kicked down. He leaned over the desk. "The sample. It belonged to a private donor, a VIP client who froze his genetic material years ago." "Who?" "Jaden Moretti." The name hit the room like a bomb. Elira stopped breathing. Everyone in the city knew that name. Jaden the Wolf Moretti, the head of the Moretti crime family. The man who controlled the docks, the politicians, and half the police force. He was a myth, a monster, a man who killed without blinking. "And," Dr. Frey continued, tears leaking from his eyes now, "he doesn't know. If he finds out his heir is growing inside a random waitress instead of his chosen surrogate, he will kill us all. He will kill me. And Ms. Vance, he will kill you." Elira didn't take the money. She didn't sign the papers. She ran. Panic was a primitive instinct, bypassing logic and reason. Dr. Frey had tried to grab her arm, shouting about the $2 million, shouting that she was signing her death warrant, but Elira had shoved him into his bookshelf and bolted. She ran out of Lennox Mercy, ignoring the startled cries of the receptionist. She ran until her lungs burned, diving into the subway station at 77th Street. She squeezed onto a crowded train, burying herself between a businessman and a tourist, her heart hammering against her ribs like a trapped bird. Jaden Moretti. The name echoed in her mind. She was carrying the child of the devil. She made it back to her apartment in Queens just as the sun was setting, casting long, blood-red shadows across the cracked pavement. She slammed her door, locking all 3 deadbolts. She paced the small room, her hands shaking. What could she do? Go to the police? The Morettis owned the police. Go to the hospital? Frey would find her. She needed to leave the city. Tonight. Elira grabbed her duffel bag from under the bed. She threw in clothes, her meager savings jar, her passport. She was zipping the bag shut when the sound stopped her cold. Crunch. It was the sound of tires rolling slowly over the gravel in the alleyway beneath her window. Her apartment was on the 2nd floor, facing the back. Vehicles rarely came down there. Elira crept to the window and peeked through the blinds. 3 black Cadillac Escalades were idling in the alley. The windows were tinted pitch black. They looked like sleek, silent predators. Her phone buzzed in her pocket. It was an unknown number. She stared at it. It buzzed again, and again. Trembling, she answered. "Hello?" "Miss Vance?" a voice said. It was smooth, deep, and terrifyingly calm. "Open the door." "Who is this?" she whispered. "You know who it is. Open the door, Elira, or my men will take it off the hinges, and I prefer not to make a scene in a residential neighborhood." It was him. Jaden. I'm calling the police," she lied, backing away from the window. "The police are currently dealing with a distraction on the other side of the borough. They won't come," Jaden said. "You have 10 seconds. 1, 2. Elira looked at the fire escape. If she climbed out, they would see her. There was no way out. 3, 4. She heard heavy footsteps on the stairs outside her apartment. Not rushing, just steady, heavy, inevitable steps. 5, 6. "Please," she whispered into the phone. "I didn't do anything. It was an accident. We'll discuss the nature of the accident face to face. 7, 8. Elira dropped the phone. She couldn't move. She stood frozen in the center of her living room as the lock on her door clicked. It didn't break. Someone outside had a key. Or a pick. The door swung open. The hallway was filled with men in suits. They were huge, their jackets bulging with the unmistakable outline of shoulder holsters. But they stepped aside. A man walked in. Jaden Moretti was taller than he looked in the blurry paparazzi photos. He was over 6 feet, wearing a charcoal suit that cost more than Elira's entire building. He had dark, swept-back hair and eyes the color of cold steel. A scar ran through his left eyebrow, giving him a permanently dangerous expression. He didn't look like a thug. He looked like a king who had just walked into a peasant's hovel. He closed the door behind him, shutting out the bodyguards. It was just the 2 of them. Elira backed up until her legs hit the edge of her sofa. "Don't hurt me," she whimpered. Jaden scanned the room. He looked at the peeling wallpaper, the cheap rug, and finally, the duffel bag on the bed. "Going somewhere?" he asked. His voice was low, vibrating in the small room. "I didn't steal it," Elira blurted out, her hands covering her stomach protectively. "I went for a checkup. The doctor. He messed up. He told me it was a mistake." Jaden took a step closer. The air in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. "Dr. Frey has already been debriefed. He told me everything before he met his unfortunate end an hour ago." Elira gasped. "You killed him?" "Incompetence has consequences," Jaden said coldly. He stopped just a foot away from her. He smelled of rain, expensive cologne, and tobacco. He looked down at her, his gaze dropping to her stomach. For a second, a flicker of something passed through his eyes. Not softness, possessiveness. "Do you know what you are carrying, Elira?" he asked. "A baby," she whispered. "My legacy," he corrected. "I have enemies, Elira. Enemies who would pay millions to see my bloodline ended before it begins. And now, my legacy is inside a woman I don't know. A woman with no protection. A woman living in a place with a lock a child could pick." "I can take care of myself," she said, though her voice shook. Jaden laughed, a dry, humorless sound. "No, you can't. If I found you this easily, my enemies will find you by morning. The Russians, the Triads, or perhaps my own business partners who want to see me fall." He reached out. Elira flinched, closing her eyes, expecting a strike. Instead, she felt his hand, large and warm, rest gently on her chin. He tilted her head up, forcing her to look into his steel-grey eyes. "You have 2 choices, Elira Vance," Jaden said. "Choice A, you stay here. I walk out that door. Within 6 hours, a hit squad will come through that window. They will kill you, and they will ensure my child never takes a breath." Elira swallowed hard. "And choice B?" "Choice B. You come with me. You live in my house. You eat my food. You sleep under my roof. You become my property until that child is born." "And after?" Elira asked, tears spilling over. "After the baby is born?" Jaden's face hardened. He dropped his hand from her chin. "We will cross that bridge when we get to it. But know this, no one takes a Moretti away from me. Not even the mother." He turned and opened the door. "Grab your bag. We leave now." Elira looked at her pathetic apartment. She looked at the man who terrified the entire city. She realized she didn't really have a choice at all. If she wanted this baby to live, and despite the shock, a fierce instinct was already blooming inside her, she had to go with the devil. She grabbed her bag. "Smart girl," Jaden murmured as she walked past him. As they walked down the stairs, flanked by armed guards, Elira didn't notice the black sedan parked down the street, its headlights off. Inside, a woman with blonde hair and manicured nails watched them through binoculars. Vanessa Sterling, Jaden's fiancée, lowered the binoculars. Her lips curled into a snarl. "She's with him," Vanessa hissed into her phone. "The little rat is with him. Get the crew ready. She doesn't make it to the 3rd trimester." The Moretti estate wasn't a house. It was a fortress disguised as a palace. Located in the secluded hills of upstate New York, it was surrounded by 10-foot stone walls, topped with electrified fencing. Cameras swiveled on every corner, like mechanical hawks, and men with assault rifles patrolled the perimeter with German shepherds. Elira had been there for 3 days, and she felt less like a guest and more like a prize bird trapped in a gilded cage. Her room was larger than her entire apartment in Queens. It had floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking a manicured garden, a 4-poster bed with sheets made of Egyptian cotton, and a walk-in closet filled with clothes that fit her perfectly. Jayden had evidently had someone guess her size, or perhaps he had simply looked at her and known. The thought made her shiver. She hadn't seen Jayden since the first night. Her meals were brought to her by a stern, older woman named Mrs. Galloway, the housekeeper, who spoke only when necessary. "Eat," Mrs. Galloway said, setting a tray of grilled salmon and spinach on the table. "Mr. Moretti insists you maintain a high-protein diet for the heir." "Does Mr. Moretti intend to visit me, or am I just an incubator to him?" Elira asked, pushing the food around with her fork. Mrs. Galloway paused at the door. "Mr. Moretti is a busy man. He is currently dealing with complications. You are safe here. That is all you need to know." But Elira didn't feel safe. She felt watched. That afternoon, she decided to test the boundaries of her cage. She walked out of her room and down the grand marble staircase. The house was silent, a mausoleum of wealth. She wandered into a library that smelled of old leather and brandy. "I don't recall giving you permission to roam," a voice cut through the silence. Elira jumped. Jayden was sitting in a high-backed leather chair by the fireplace, a glass of whiskey in his hand. He wasn't wearing his suit jacket. His white shirt was unbuttoned at the top, revealing a hint of a tattoo on his chest. He looked tired. "I'm not a prisoner, Jayden," Elira said, trying to keep her voice steady. "If I'm carrying your child, I deserve to walk around." Jayden swirled the amber liquid in his glass. "You are not a prisoner, Elira. You are a target. There is a difference. But since you are here, sit." He gestured to the chair opposite him. Elira sat, perching on the edge of the seat. "Why me?" she asked softly. "Of all the samples, why did you choose to freeze one? You don't seem like the fatherly type." Jayden's eyes darkened. He looked into the fire. "I'm not. But in my world, blood is the only currency that matters. My father built this empire. If I die without an heir, it goes to my cousins, and my cousins are greedy, incompetent rats who would burn the city to the ground. I needed insurance. I just didn't expect the insurance policy to be walking around my library, asking questions." Before Elira could respond, the heavy double doors of the library swung open. "Jayden, darling, the guard said you were in here." Elira turned to see a woman striding in. She was stunning. Tall, with platinum blonde hair, wearing a red dress that looked painted on. Her heels clicked sharply against the hardwood floor. This was Vanessa Sterling. Vanessa stopped when she saw Elira. Her smile didn't falter, but her eyes, ice blue and sharp, narrowed instantly. "And who is this?" Vanessa asked, her voice dripping with artificial sweetness. Jayden stood up, his expression unreadable. "Vanessa, this is Elira Vance. She is staying with us for a while." "The waitress?" Vanessa laughed, a sound like breaking glass. "Oh, Jayden, I heard rumors about the mix-up at the clinic, but I didn't think you'd actually bring the little stray home. You should have just paid her off and handled the extraction." Elira felt a surge of anger. "I'm right here," she said. Vanessa ignored her, walking up to Jayden and placing a possessive hand on his chest. "Jayden, think about the optics. We are to be married in 6 months. Having a pregnant mistress living in the house? It's tacky." "She is not a mistress," Jayden said, his voice dropping an octave. "She is the mother of my child, and she stays until the baby is born. That is non-negotiable." Vanessa's smile tightened. She turned to Elira, looking her up and down with undisguised disgust. "Well then, we must make you comfortable." She walked over to a side table where a silver tea service sat. "Mrs. Galloway brought fresh herbal tea. You must be parched, Elira. Here." Vanessa poured a cup. Her back was to them, obscuring her hands for a split second. She turned around and offered the delicate china cup to Elira. "Chamomile. Good for the nerves," Vanessa said. Elira reached for it. She was thirsty, and she didn't want to start a war with the woman who was essentially the lady of the house. As her fingers touched the saucer, Jaden's hand shot out. He grabbed Elira's wrist, stopping her. "Jaden?" Elira gasped. Jaden stared at Vanessa. The silence in the room grew heavy, suffocating. He took the cup from Elira's hand and lifted it to his nose. He sniffed it once. Then, with a violent motion, he hurled the cup into the fireplace. The china shattered, and the liquid hissed as it hit the flames, flaring up with a strange greenish hue. "Oleander," Jaden whispered. "Distilled oleander extract. Tasteless in strong tea. Deadly within an hour." Elira scrambled back in her chair, horror clutching her throat. "She tried to poison me." Vanessa's face went pale, but she tried to laugh it off. "Don't be ridiculous, Jaden. It's just tea. You're being paranoid." Jaden moved faster than Elira could track. In a second, he had crossed the distance and gripped Vanessa by the throat, pinning her against the bookshelf. "I know the smell, Vanessa," he snarled, his face inches from hers. "My father used it on the Irish mob boss in '98. Do not lie to me." Vanessa clawed at his hand, gasping. I did it for us. That thing inside her. It threatens our alliance. My father won't like you having a bastard heir." "Let her go, Jaden," Elira shouted, terrified he was going to snap her neck right in front of her. Jaden held her for a second longer, then released her. Vanessa slumped to the floor, coughing, clutching her neck. "Get out," Jaden said, his voice calm and terrifying. "The wedding is still on because I need your father's territory. But if you ever touch Elira or the food she eats again, I will return you to your father in pieces. Do you understand?" Vanessa scrambled up, her eyes filled with hate as she looked at Elira. "You'll regret this," she hissed at Elira. "You don't belong here. You're just a vessel." She ran out of the room. Jaden adjusted his cuffs, breathing heavily. He turned to Elira. The anger in his eyes vanished, replaced by a strange, intense concern. "Are you all right?" he asked. Elira was shaking. "She tried to kill me. She actually tried to kill me." "I told you," Jaden said, walking over and pouring himself another drink, his hand trembling slightly. "You are safe from the world outside, Elira, but in here, the wolves are just as hungry." He looked at her, and for the first time, Elira saw the burden he carried. He was surrounded by vipers. "You saved me," she whispered. "I protect what is mine," Jaden replied. He downed the whiskey. "Go to your room. Lock the door. From now on, you eat nothing unless Mrs. Galloway tastes it in front of you first." 2 months later, Elira was showing. A small, firm bump had appeared, changing her silhouette. The morning sickness had faded, replaced by a ravenous hunger and a strange, restless energy. Living with Jaden was complicated. He was distant, often disappearing for days at a time to deal with business, returning with bruised knuckles and exhausted eyes. But when he was home, he was intensely attentive. He checked her diet. He asked about her sleep. He even sat with her in the library in the evenings, reading reports while she read novels. They rarely spoke about personal things, but a silent truce had formed between them. The truce was broken on a rainy Tuesday. "Get dressed," Jaden said, entering her room without knocking. He was wearing a tactical vest over his dress shirt. "We are going to the doctor." "Dr. Frey is dead," Elira reminded him. "I have a private physician, Dr. Aris. He operates out of a secure facility in Brooklyn. It's time for the anatomy scan. I want to know the gender." The drive was tense. They took an armored SUV, flanked by 2 other vehicles. Jaden drove, his eyes constantly scanning the mirrors. "Is something wrong?" Elira asked, buckling her seatbelt over her bump. "Chatter on the wire," Jaden said briefly. "Someone is making moves on the docks. It's making everyone twitchy." The clinic was located in the back of a nondescript warehouse. Inside, however, it was state-of-the-art. Dr. Aris, a Greek man with kind eyes and no questions, performed the ultrasound. The room was dark, lit only by the blue glow of the monitor. "There," Dr. Aris pointed. 10 fingers, 10 toes, strong heart." The sound filled the room again. Whoosh, whoosh. Elira looked at Jaden. He was staring at the screen, entranced. The hard lines of his face had softened. He looked human. He reached out, his finger hovering over the screen, tracing the outline of the tiny head. "It's a boy," Dr. Aris announced. Jaden let out a breath he seemed to have been holding for years. "A son," he whispered. "A Moretti." He looked at Elira. In the darkness, their eyes met. The intensity of his gaze made her heart race faster than the baby's. For a moment, it wasn't about contracts or legacies. It was just a man and a woman, bound together by the miracle of life. "Thank you," he said, his voice rough. They left the clinic an hour later, the sonogram picture tucked into Jaden's breast pocket like a medal of honor. The rain had turned into a torrential downpour. They got back into the SUV. "We go the back way," Jaden spoke into his radio to the other cars. "Take the Queens Midtown Tunnel." They were halfway to the tunnel entrance, navigating a narrow industrial street, when the world exploded. The lead car, the one in front of them, suddenly erupted into a fireball. An RPG had hit it from a rooftop. "Get down!" Jaden screamed, slamming on the brakes. He threw his arm across Elira's chest, pinning her to the seat as the SUV skidded on the wet asphalt, spinning 180 degrees. Bullets began to ping against the armored glass like hail. Thwack, thwack, crack. "Stay down!" Jaden unbuckled his seatbelt and drew a handgun from his holster. "Jaden!" Elira screamed, covering her head. "We're boxed in," Jaden growled. He looked in the rearview mirror. A heavy truck had blocked the street behind them. Men in ski masks were pouring out of a van, carrying automatic rifles. "Listen to me," Jaden said, grabbing Elira's face. "The glass holds for maybe 30 seconds against this caliber. I'm going to open my door and draw their fire. You crawl into the driver's seat and drive. Do not stop for anything." "No, I can't leave you. You are carrying my son," Jaden roared, his eyes blazing. "You drive." He kicked his door open and rolled out onto the wet pavement. He began firing instantly. Bang, bang, bang. 2 attackers dropped. The distraction worked. The gunfire shifted toward Jaden, who was taking cover behind the engine block. Elira scrambled into the driver's seat. She was shaking so hard she could barely grip the wheel. She looked out the window. Jaden was a demon. He moved with terrifying precision, taking shots, moving, reloading. But there were too many of them. She saw a man on the rooftop aiming a sniper rifle. He wasn't aiming at Jayden. He was aiming at the gas tank of the SUV. "No!" Elira screamed. She didn't drive away. She slammed the car into reverse. The heavy armored bumper of the SUV smashed into two of the attackers approaching from the rear. The impact jarred her bones, but she spun the wheel, swinging the car around to create a shield between Jayden and the gunmen. "Get in!" she shrieked, unlocking the passenger door. Jayden looked at her, shock registering on his blood-spattered face. He didn't argue. He dove into the passenger seat just as the sniper's bullet sparked against the roof. "Go! Go! Go! Elira floored it. She rammed the blockade truck, the SUV's heavy frame crumpling the smaller vehicle's fender enough to squeeze through. She drove like a maniac, running red lights, scraping against guardrails, her heart pounding in her ears. Jayden was slumped in the seat next to her. "We made it," Elira panted, glancing at him. "Jayden, we—" She stopped. Jayden was clutching his side. Dark, thick blood was oozing between his fingers, staining his white shirt crimson. "Jayden!" "Keep driving," he gritted out, his face grey. "Don't go home. Compromised. Go to the safe house, 42nd and 8th. His head lolled back. "Jayden, stay with me," Elira cried, tears blurring her vision. "My son," Jayden mumbled, his eyes losing focus. "Keep him safe." He passed out. Elira was alone in a bullet-ridden car, driving a dying Mafia Don through the streets of New York, with a baby kicking in her belly and an army of killers on her tail. She realized then that the checkup had been the easy part. The real fight for survival had just begun. The safe house, located in a forgotten industrial block near the West Side Highway, was designed for function, not comfort. It was steel and concrete, sealed off from the world. Elira dragged the armored SUV into the attached garage, the tires squealing on the wet floor. The moment the metal door hissed shut behind them, the silence was overwhelming. Jayden was heavy, a dead weight slumped against her. His breathing was shallow, his suit jacket soaked with blood. Panic threatened to overwhelm Elira, but the sound of her baby shifting inside her was a strange anchor. She had to be strong. For the baby. For him. She wrestled Jayden out of the car, dragging his massive frame across the cold cement and through a heavy, unmarked door into the living quarters. The place was sparsely furnished. A kitchen, a military-grade first aid station, and 2 beds. "Jayden, wake up, Yistotao," she pleaded, slapping his cheek gently. He didn't respond. She laid him on the stainless steel examination table near the medical kit. His dark eyes were closed, his breathing labored. She stripped off his blood-soaked clothes, her hands shaking as she cut away the fine Italian fabric. The sight of his powerful, scarred torso made her heart ache with a strange mix of fear and admiration. The wound was in his upper left side, just below the ribs. It wasn't a through-and-through shot. The bullet was lodged deep. She had to get it out, or he would die from infection and internal bleeding. The medical station was stocked like a combat medic's kit. She found a manual with clear, graphic diagrams. Elira, who had only ever administered a plaster in her life, was now tasked with battlefield surgery. She followed the instructions. Sterilize the area with harsh iodine, find the local anesthetic, a vial of lidocaine, and prepare the forceps. Her hands were surprisingly steady. The terror was still there, but it was trapped beneath a layer of pure, icy focus. She injected the lidocaine near the wound. Jayden didn't even flinch. "I need you to stay with me, Jayden," she whispered, leaning close to his ear. I need you to fight this. You have a son coming. Don't you dare leave us!" Then came the hardest part. She took the scalpel. She deepened the wound entry point, following the bullet's path. The smell of blood and antiseptic was overwhelming. She had to bite her lip to keep from gagging. "For the air," she muttered, forcing herself to be clinical. She worked the sterile forceps into the opening, navigating the muscle tissue. It felt like hours. Finally, with a small, sickening clink, she found it. She slowly pulled the forceps out. A mangled piece of lead dropped onto the tray. Elira sagged against the table, gasping for air. The danger was not over, but the immediate threat was removed. The rest was rote. She cleaned the wound meticulously, stitching the cut with practiced precision, guided by the diagrams in the manual. When she was done, she covered the incision with a heavy-duty bandage. She settled Jaden into one of the sparse beds, changing his bandages hourly throughout the night, monitoring his fever. By the time dawn broke, his fever had dropped slightly, and his breathing was evening out. Just as the sun peeked through the slit windows, Jaden stirred. His eyes fluttered open. They were cloudy with pain, but they focused on Elira. "Elira," he rasped, his voice raw. "I'm here," she whispered, taking his hand. His skin was hot and clammy. He looked down at the bandages. A faint smile touched his lips, a genuine, tired expression that cracked the facade of the ruthless Don. "You're a doctor now," he managed, his voice barely audible. "I'm a desperate mother," she corrected, tears finally escaping. "Don't ever do that to me again." He squeezed her hand. "The ambush. Vanzetti," he mumbled, naming his rival. "But how did they know the route?" Jaden's eyes hardened, even in his weakened state. "This isn't Vanzetti's style. This was close. Too close. Someone inside talked." He looked at Elira, his vulnerability clear. "No one. No one knows about this safe house, Elira. Only me, the driver, and Magnus. Magnus is my head of security, my consigliere. He's been with me since I was a boy. If Magnus betrayed you, who can you trust?" Elira asked, her voice trembling. Jaden closed his eyes again, pulling her hand to his lips and pressing a feverish kiss to her knuckles. "Right now, only the mother of my son." The roles had shifted. She was no longer his captive, but his lifeline. And in the dark, quiet safety of that room, Elira realized that the line between fear and profound connection had utterly vanished. A week passed in a haze of recovery and shared silence. Elira nursed Jaden back to health. She fed him broth, changed his dressings, and managed his pain medication. Jaden, weakened and relying entirely on her, was forced to shed his armor. They talked, finally. Not about the Mafia, but about life. Elira told him about her struggles, the double shifts, the art classes she couldn't afford, the dreams of opening her own small gallery. Jaden listened, his steel eyes surprisingly gentle. He spoke of his childhood, a solitary existence in the estate, the pressure to conform to the Moretti legacy, the loneliness of being powerful. "My father," Jaden confided one evening, his voice low and haunted. "He made me watch when I was 15. He said you have to see the blood spill to understand the cost of empire." "Did you ever regret it?" Elira asked, leaning against the headboard of her own bed. Jaden looked at the scar above his eyebrow, touching it gently. "Regret the power? Never. Regret the things I've had to do. Every night. That's the price, that's the karma. He reached for her hand across the small gap between the beds. You are innocent, Elira. Like sunlight in this darkness. I don't know how I let you get sucked into this. You didn't let me, Elira said, her thumb tracing the lines on his palm. Your doctor did. But you saved me from Vanessa. And I saved you from Vanzetti. We're partners in crime now, whether we like it or not. That night, the air between them was electric. They were two people who had faced death together and emerged irrevocably changed. Jayden crossed the small space separating them. He didn't rush. He simply pulled her closer, his hand cupping her cheek, his thumb brushing away a stray tear she hadn't realized was there. You should be terrified of me, he murmured. I was, Elira admitted, looking into his eyes. Now, I think I'm terrified of losing you. He lowered his head, and their lips met. It wasn't the violent, desperate kiss of romance novels. It was slow, careful, and deeply meaningful, a promise forged in blood and shared secrets. It sealed the bond of dependency and budding love. They became inseparable. Jayden, now strong enough to walk but still recovering, spent his days on the satellite phone, speaking in coded, whispered Russian and Italian, trying to re-establish control without alerting his enemy that he was injured. One evening, Jayden stepped away to take a private call in the soundproofed pantry. Elira, feeling restless, went into the main room. She was tidying up, putting away the empty coffee mugs, when she noticed Jayden's spare phone, an older burner model he used for low-level communication, on the table. It was face down, charging. A flicker of light caught her eye. It was an incoming text notification that had briefly lit the screen. Elira hesitated. Jayden had instilled one absolute rule: never touch my communication devices. But Jayden had also said, if Magnus betrayed me, who can you trust? Driven by a terrible premonition, Elira picked up the phone. She quickly unlocked it. It was locked with a simple 4-digit code she had seen him use once. The text notification was from an unsaved number. The message was short, chilling, and written in a cryptic code that only the inner circle would understand. The package is secure. The wolf is grounded. The vulture is mobilizing the northern route, ready for pickup. The wolf, Jayden. The package, presumably her and the baby. But the vulture. Elira froze. The code was not Vanzetti's. Vanzetti used a maritime-based code. This was a classic, old-school Moretti cipher. A cipher only Magnus, Jayden, and one or two other high-ranking capos would know. She scrolled back through the burner phone's text history, her fingers shaking so violently, she almost dropped the device. There, just 3 days before the ambush, was a message sent to the burner from Jayden's main phone, which he used exclusively to communicate with Magnus. J. Status? Magnus. Unsaved number. Scheduled checkup confirmed for 1400. Route details finalized. The doctor is in place. The safe house wasn't just compromised by Magnus. The ambush wasn't Vanzetti's move. Not entirely. It was a joint operation facilitated by a mole at the highest level of the Moretti family. Magnus hadn't just told Vanzetti the route. Magnus had orchestrated the entire sequence of events, working from Jayden's own command structure. The accident at the clinic. The doctor, Frey, was the cousin of Magnus's mistress. A cold, hard realization settled over Elira. She was staring at undeniable proof of high treason that nearly killed the only man she had ever truly loved. Suddenly, the pantry door opened. Jayden walked out, rubbing his temples. He stopped short when he saw the burner phone in her hand. His eyes narrowed instantly, and the mask of the ruthless Don slammed back into place. "What do you think you're doing, Elira?" Jaden asked, his voice flat, devoid of warmth. Elira looked at the screen, then at the man she had just saved. She saw not the recovering patient, but the wolf. "Magnus," she breathed, her voice barely a whisper. "He set you up from the beginning." Jaden's eyes flickered to the screen, absorbing the devastating text in an instant. All emotion vanished, replaced by deadly calculation. He had always trusted Magnus above all others. The betrayal was deeper than the bullet wound. "Give me the phone," Jaden commanded, holding out his hand. Elira took a shaky step back. "And what about the vulture? Who is the vulture, Jaden?" Jaden hesitated. He didn't want her to know. Not yet. "That's not your concern," he said. "It is my concern. That thing you call the vulture is coming to take the package, me and your son." Before Jaden could answer, the lights in the safe house flickered, then died, plunging the room into absolute darkness. The heavy steel door that led into the garage hissed open. Then a voice, amplified by a bullhorn, cut through the silence. "Jaden! Jaden Moretti! Jaden! We know you're in there, you wounded rat! Send out the girl and the package, and we'll let you die in peace." It wasn't Vanzetti. It was a familiar, chilling voice, one that belonged to the man who had promised to protect Jaden since childhood. "This is Magnus. The Moretti family has new leadership, Jaden, and your traitorous bloodline ends tonight." The darkness that enveloped the safe house was absolute, broken only by the sporadic, anxious flashes of lightning illuminating the driving rain outside. The voice of Magnus, Jaden's betrayer, echoed through the bullhorn, amplified and distorted, a sinister final note in a decades-long friendship. "Jaden, we know you're wounded. Come out and face your fate." Jaden did not panic. The news of Magnus's treachery had shocked him, but the immediate threat snapped him back into the cold, calculated mindset of the Don. He moved with the precision of a wounded predator. "The lights are on a generator," Jaden hissed, pulling Elira towards the heavy steel counter where the medical supplies were kept. "They've cut the main power. The steel door to the garage will buy us 60 seconds, maybe 90, if they have breaching charges. Less." "Who is the vulture?" Elira demanded, her voice tight, adrenaline overriding her fear. "Leo Sterling," Jaden spat the name like venom. "Vanessa's older brother. He runs his father's paramilitary operations. Magnus gave him the location. They want the heir, but more importantly, they want the public execution of the Moretti line." Jaden reached into a hidden panel beneath the counter and pulled out two things, a heavy-duty, suppressed Glock and a keycard. "I taught you how to shoot, Elira. Now you prove you learned," he said, pressing the gun into her hands. "There is a reinforced panic room under the floor, behind the furnace. It's small, but insulated. Get in, lock yourself down. You are the package. You do not expose yourself." Elira shook her head. "I'm not leaving you." "That is not a request," Jaden roared, gripping her shoulders. "I am going to the roof generator. I need to bring the power back online, or the surveillance feeds are useless. I'll make a diversion. When I shout, you run." Before she could argue, the explosion hit. The garage door buckled inward with a terrifying boom. Shrapnel tore through the reinforced entrance door, spraying across the room. The men were inside. "Go!" Jaden shoved her toward the utility closet, then drew his own weapon. disappearing into the maze of concrete pillars that supported the structure. Elira hesitated for only a second. She crouched behind the counter, the heavy Glock feeling unnatural but solid in her trembling hands. She heard the distinct, heavy footsteps of the attackers. Then she saw Jaden. He emerged from the shadows, flanking the advancing gunman. Crack, crack, crack. His shots were precise, but slow. The pain from his side wound was slowing him down. "Magnus," Jaden's voice echoed, cold and challenging. "You forget who raised you." Magnus stepped into the light, flanked by 2 armed men. He wasn't wearing a suit. He was in black tactical gear, his face grim. "You grew weak, Jaden," Magnus shouted over the din. "The family needs a Don who doesn't obsess over a bastard child from a street rat. Antonio Corleone and Don Sterling will merge the families under a new structure. They just need you out of the way." Jaden fired, grazing Magnus's shoulder. Magnus returned fire, forcing Jaden to dive behind a thick pillar. Elira knew Jaden couldn't hold them off alone. He was bleeding again. His desperation was palpable. She took a deep breath. She raised the Glock. She didn't aim at Magnus. She aimed at the exposed conduit running along the wall near the intruders. Bang! The shot was wild, but it hit the conduit. Sparks flew, showering the intruders in a flash of blinding light and causing a temporary power surge that flickered the main lights back on for a split second before dying again. The chaos worked. The 2 men flanking Magnus momentarily raised their arms to shield their eyes. In that half-second, Jaden moved. He vaulted over the barrier, landing heavily on his wounded side, but driving his elbow into the throat of the first man, then firing a single, devastating shot into the second. He looked at Magnus, his face a mask of sorrow and fury. "You chose the life of a dog, Magnus. You die like one." Jaden fired. Magnus dropped, clutching his chest, his eyes wide with disbelief, the bullhorn tumbling from his hand. The momentary victory was shattered by a new voice, calm and cultured, emerging from the garage entrance. "Amateur hour, Jaden. Did you think your little hiding spot was a secret?" Leo Sterling walked in. He was a terrifying contrast to his men. He wore a tailored suit and polished shoes, carrying a custom automatic rifle with unnerving casualness. "Where is my sister's little mistake, Jaden?" Leo asked, leveling the rifle. "I'm under orders to retrieve the package intact, but destroy the vessel." Jaden stepped out from cover, holding his side. "You'll have to kill me first, Leo." "A pleasure." Leo fired. Jaden braced himself, but Leo didn't aim for the chest. He fired 2 shots into Jaden's knees. Jaden screamed, a guttural sound of pain and helplessness, and crumpled to the floor. "Jaden!" Elira cried, scrambling out from cover, dropping her gun and running toward him. Leo Sterling caught her easily, wrapping a powerful arm around her waist and pressing the cold barrel of the rifle against her temple. "Got the vessel," Leo drawled into his earpiece. "The package is secure." Elira struggled against his grip, sobbing as she looked down at Jaden, who was dragging himself toward her, leaving a thick trail of blood. "Let her go, Leo," Jaden gasped, his voice broken. "The old guard is done, Moretti," Leo sneered, pulling Elira back toward the garage. "Vanessa will be pleased to raise the heir. She'll ensure the child is properly indoctrinated. As a Sterling, not a Moretti." But as Leo dragged Elira, a new pain seized her. A pain that had nothing to do with fear and everything to do with inevitability. A sharp, crushing wave of agony ripped through her abdomen. She gasped, doubling over. "Stop struggling, wench!" Leo barked, tightening his grip. I can't." Elira choked out, staring down in horror. "The baby. It's coming." A scream tore from her throat as a heavy contraction gripped her. The floor was wet, the air filled with the smell of gunpowder and blood. Leo Sterling looked down at the floor, where a small puddle was spreading around Elira's feet. His cultivated composure cracked, replaced by utter disgust. "Are you serious? Now? Get out of the way, you filthy animal." Leo shoved her away, tossing her onto the concrete floor like a sack of trash, terrified of the biological mess. Elira hit the floor hard, crying out. Jaden, his legs useless, saw his chance. The vulture had flinched. The wolf had one final move. He dragged himself over to the Glock. Elira had dropped, snatched it up, and fired 3 quick shots into Leo Sterling's torso. Leo dropped his rifle, staggering back against the garage wall, staring down at his pristine white shirt blooming crimson. Jaden didn't look at Leo. He dragged himself to Elira, pulling her against his chest. "Jaden, it hurts!" she screamed, gripping his hand so hard she might have broken his fingers. "I'm here," Jaden whispered, ignoring his own excruciating pain. "I'm right here. Don't fight it, Elira. Just breathe." The safe house was still under siege. Sirens were wailing in the distance, and the threat of more men remained. But none of it mattered. Jaden, the ruthless Mafia Don, was focused only on the woman in his arms. He looked down. He saw the crown of his son's head emerging. He coached her, his hands that had crushed bones and signed death warrants, now working with tenderness and absolute focus. He held her hand, guided the baby, and whispered Italian words of reassurance and love that Elira had never heard him speak before. With a final, shattering push, a cry pierced the smoke and the silence. A loud, healthy, furious cry. Jaden cut the cord with a surgical scissor from the trauma kit. He wrapped the slick, pink body of his son in his own bloodied shirt and held him out to Elira. "He's here," Jaden whispered, his voice thick with emotion. "Our son. He's perfect." Elira took the baby, holding him tight, the pain of the birth instantly replaced by the overwhelming, primal force of motherhood. The sirens outside were getting closer. Jaden looked up. Leo Sterling was trying to crawl away, still alive. Jaden raised his gun, but didn't fire. "Tell your father," Jaden rasped, pulling Elira and the baby close. "Tell Don Sterling that the Moretti heir was born today, amidst your failure. Tell him the wolf is wounded, but not dead." He grabbed the keycard from the floor and pressed the button hidden beneath the counter. A hidden, reinforced wall section slid open, revealing the small, insulated panic room. Jaden pushed Elira and the baby inside. "The authorities will be here in minutes," Jaden said, his eyes filled with a desperate, painful love. "You are innocent. They will believe you were kidnapped. You will give them the story. You will keep our son safe." "What about you?" Elira cried. "I need to disappear," Jaden said, closing the heavy steel door. "I can't be found here, but I will find you. Wait for me, Elira. I promise you this. I always claim what is mine." The door slammed shut. Elira was sealed in the darkness, alone with the warmth and the vigorous cry of her newborn son. She listened as Jaden dragged his bleeding body out of the room, towards the back entrance, leaving her to face the world and the authorities alone, holding the most precious, most dangerous baby in New York. The baby that had begun as a catastrophic mistake, but had ended up as their defiant, living future. And so the story of Elira Vance, the waitress who went in for a routine checkup, became the legend of the woman who held the fate of the Moretti dynasty in her hands. She survived poison, a siege, and giving birth on a concrete floor next to a dying Mafia don, all for the love of the tiny heir that Jaden Moretti would stop at nothing to reclaim. Jaden vanished that night, but Elira knew the wolf would always return to his mate and his son. The Mafia world is built on violence and betrayal, but in the heart of the storm, they found a love that was ruthless, undeniable, and bound by blood. Did Jaden return for his family? Did Elira manage to keep their son safe from Vanessa and the remnants of Don Sterling's revenge? We need your thoughts. If you loved this dramatic journey, hit the like button. Share this story with another drama fanatic, and subscribe to the channel and ring that bell so you don't miss the upcoming sequel. The Vengeance of the Wolf's Bride.